It was Lando's car, I'm sure.
Yeah, smothered it in
That was so
Flowviz.
funny because he was literally sat there and had a plastic bag over his head, and they just painted the whole car.
Bottom letter, yeah. Oh, and this is another thing that we need to correct from last time. It's not steak. It's Sauber. It's Sauber. We kept calling it steak because our brains were frazzled, and it's the only thing that's on the car. So we kept calling them steak, but it is Kick Sauber. We will amend that from now at this point going on forward.
But there were red flags for things that probably people wouldn't expect.
Would not
so
anticipate at all.
a random bloody bus on the track, like what the hell?
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of the Drive to Thrive podcast. Today we're going to be looking at the preseason testing, and we're going to be reviewing our thoughts about how preseason testing went, what we think the kind of outcomes might be slightly for this year, and we've also got a little bit of gossip to share with you as well about what's gone through this weekend and prior to preseason testing. Preseason testing, it's not always been a thing for us to view. Sometimes it's been behind closed doors, but recently we've had the luxury to watch preseason testing, and even though it hasn't been that eventful compared to a race, it's still interesting to see what the teams do, how they do their various different kind of testing of modes, setups, aerodynamics, etc. The main reason for preseason testing is, one, to give all the drivers experience with the car before they go into the first race of the season. It's for them to test different setups, whether it's different wings, to see how they can get various different downforce on the car. It's to put on the Flowviz and the air rakes to see how the aerodynamics of their new design of their kind of vehicle performs on the track, whether it's in corners, at slow speeds, high speeds, etc. Equally, we've had new regulations on how either certain wings or certain aerodynamics need to be, so they need to test them, because they've done all this on kind of computational designs. They've done it with the air tunnel, but they've not done it actually on a track, most likely. So this is for them to go out there, get the data, so that they've got a few final tweaks to do before they get into the race week.
It's it's super exciting for us as a viewer because it's the first time we get to see the cars on track after a long winter break. It is 3 long days, so is it 4 hours each day, or each driver gets 4 hours? Because there's a morning and afternoon session each day, so the teams set it up differently where, for instance, like I think it was Red Bull where Max had the whole of Friday or Friday afternoon, whereas Ferrari split it 50-50, so one driver would have the morning session and one driver would have the afternoon session. And I think they also change it so each driver gets a morning and afternoon slot as well, because then they can assess things like temperature, tyre degradation,
fuel loads,
exactly. So as much as it is 3 days and there is a lot of content to consume as a viewer, I think by and large we don't really, my takeaway from testing was that we didn't really get that much information in terms of who's going to be the championship winner next year.
No.
I think there's still obviously the 4 teams. McLaren are obviously the front runner, but there's obviously the 4 top teams that are still into play, and I think a lot of the teams sometimes keep their cards close to their chest as well. They don't want to give too much away. So it's very exciting because it's the first time we get to see everyone in action in the new cars, the new teams, the new liveries. There was a few points that we're going to talk about of interest, but I think by and large it's just waiting for next weekend when we get to Melbourne. Yeah,
it is one of those things where you get to watch preseason testing and you kind of think it's going to be really cool because you get excited for it. And like I say, it was a bit uneventful because with preseason testing, I'm sure if anyone watched it, one of the terms that everyone kind of hears being thrown around is sandbagging.
Yeah.
Like Danielle says, they kind of want to keep their cards close to their chest. I personally don't understand why you want to.
Yeah.
I guess
I don't think
you
they
think
do
you're
so
going to be
much
a front
nowadays.
runner, like just be a front runner and show it and kind of flaunt it. That, but obviously there's tweaks that everyone's making, and I guess if you show something off too much, you could have a chance to maybe develop it yourself before race week in Melbourne. And I know there was a bit of a controversy with McLaren. They had a point where they did a couple of laps with putting the Flowviz on one of the cars, but they absolutely just smothered it.
It was Lando's car, I'm sure.
Yeah, smothered it in
That was so
Flowviz.
funny because he was literally sat there and had a plastic bag over his head, and they just painted the whole car with Flovis.
People were kind of like, obviously with cameras nowadays, everyone's like, well, because there's so much Flovis on there and it's so obvious, everyone can now understand what the aerodynamics of your car are.
It's almost,
is it showing too much at once? And I think shortly after Lando going round, he then they
clearly
down.
Yeah, they clearly had
basically.
something they weren't quite happy with.
Yeah.
To put the Flovis on, so it's this like a luminous paint, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I don't know the technical term because I'm not an aerodynamicist, but I think it's clearly they've got an aero issue, and the paint helps them identify.
Yeah. So the Flovis, everything on the outside of the car is determined as a wet surface because it's where the air touches specifically. And what they want to see with the Flovis, because if they're looking at the aerodynamics and how they've designed the car, they want a smooth surface of air going over the car. This allows them to kind of basically go like a bullet through the air. If they have too many vortices and air getting disrupted, that causes issues like drag, friction on the car, and it can impact its speed. So the Flovis, hopefully when they put it on the car, they want to see nice smooth lines, and it means that they've nailed the aerodynamics of their car.
I did not know that.
If they've got kind of swirls in it, that means that it's kind of, there's disruption in the air and it's not going how they want it to. So most times when you're looking at cars with a Flovis on there, and not all Flovis is luminous green, I think Mercedes have like a bluey grey one or something like that, which obviously to the eye is a bit harder to see, but once they pull it into the garage, they can obviously see it up close. But obviously, as we saw with Lando, it looked like a giant neon kind of green
it looked like a
glow stick going around all the time. But that's what pre-season testing is. It's kind of testing the car, seeing what works. They're testing the new design. For it, and
it's obviously especially important for the rookies. It's the first time they're propagating long stints in the car and race setups, and obviously people who've moved teams like Carlos and Lewis. I can imagine it's super useful for them being on track with other cars, just to get a feel ready for Melbourne next week. But obviously there's variables, and I imagine the mechanics are still working around the clock to get that car ready for next weekend anyway. It's not almost like when they get to testing that's the final setup. I imagine they've still got lots of tweaks and lots of data to review. So let's get into testing results. So I think a good place to start would just be to highlight who were the top 3 drivers on each day, because that was actually quite interesting. But like we said before, we can't really read too much into it because they were all doing different stints on different setups. So it's almost impossible to compare them. And they all did different amount of laps as well collectively as teams. So
I think, was it Red Bull or Aston Martin was the lowest?
Yeah, Red Bull.
They're in the bottom end of the pack in terms of numbers anyway.
Yeah. So on day 1, P1 was Lando, P2 was George, P3 was Max, P4 was Charles, and P5 was Carlos. So I think that was kind of, everyone was like, right, we've picked up where we left off at the end of last season.
Looks the same.
You've obviously got McLaren in number 1 position, Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari all looking quick. Obviously, Carlos is up there in a Williams too, which that's quite exciting. So I think end of day 1, everyone was like, yeah, this is where it is. I'm not sure where Lewis finished on day 1 of testing, but I know he finished in, let me just get the results up. I'm not even sure he actually finished. Oh, he finished P2 on day 2. So that, like, all the Ferrari fans were like, finally. Yeah. He seems to have settled in the car. So then on day 2, I think the biggest surprise was Carlos was P1, Lewis was P2, Charles was P3, George was P4, and Kimi Antonelli was P5. Mm-hmm. So I think everyone was getting a bit excited with Carlos putting that in first place. Yeah. And there was a lot of talk about, does that mean he is guaranteed a trophy in this coming year?
For Sainz in Williams, I don't think so. I think they're top of the middle of the pack, maybe, or something like that. But I don't think they're going to be a consistent podium contending car, personally. Yeah,
I agree. I would say it's certainly promising, the pace that Carlos and Alex have put in over testing. And I think if anyone can do it, Carlos can. I don't think it's guaranteed, just because obviously there's only 3 trophies per race, and there's 4 teams that are looking very competitive. So there's 8 drivers fighting for those 3 podium positions. But you can't disregard things like sprint weekends and sprint qualifying where they'll be able to pick up points, and also crazy weekends like Brazil last year where the weather was horrendous and crazy. I can remember the race as well, Australia a few years ago, where like 7 cars went out and Bottas finished in the top 10 in stake. So there are races where crazy things happen, and look at when was it George and Williams when in Spa when it was rained off and he got P2 because of the quali lap he put in. So I think if they've got good qualifying pace, and if there's some kind of weather event or reliability issue, Williams are going to be hopefully there ready to pounce,
snapping up places. Yeah, definitely.
And then just to round off testing, so day 3 we've got P1 George Russell, P2 Max Verstappen, P3 Alex Albon, P4 Oscar Piastri, and P5 Pierre Gasly. So I think over the whole 3 days of testing, Mercedes were looking really promising, whether they're the second quickest team. I do think from what I watched, obviously I didn't watch it all because there was a lot to digest. McLaren are definitely going to be the ones to beat, in my opinion. Yeah. And I think if I had a gun to my head now, I would say Lando is
going to be the driver champion.
Yeah, but then I think obviously Ferrari, it's interesting because Lewis is so. I do think Ferrari were perhaps holding back a little bit. I'm not sure if we saw everything that they've got, or if it was just a case of Lewis getting to grips with everything. But I think obviously Ferrari are going to be very competitive, but I'm not sure who's going to be in the P2 position next year because you cannot terms of driver, in terms of team okay, as well, because I think Red Bull you just cannot discount them, and also Mercedes, Kimi is a very aggressive, like hungry driver, and George in the testing results he was in the top 5 every day, so he's obviously putting in well. The car's good. He's feeling at one with the car, and he's feeling really confident, hopefully. So it's certainly leading up to be a very interesting race next weekend.
It's going to be an interesting race. Touching back on the points about the rookies, I think kind of some of the things that are being said on the airwaves is like, I think Carlos Sainz maybe had not complained, but maybe said that it's kind of unfair on the rookies because they only get 3 days, and even then they still don't get 3 days because they have to do it between 2 drivers.
Yeah, true.
So they don't actually. Some of these rookies like Bortoletto, and
we've said his name right this time.
Bortoletto, yeah. Oh, and this is another thing that we need to correct from last time. It's not steak. It's Sauber. It's Sauber. We kept calling it steak because our brains were frazzled, and it's the only thing that's on the car. So we kept calling him steak, but it is Kick Sauber. We will amend that from now at this point going on forward. But Bortoletto, he's a true rookie. Who's the other true rookie? Is it Hajar or is it? Yeah. It's Hajar, yeah. So Doohan got to do a race last year. Yeah. Behrman got to do a race last year.
Lawson.
Kimi Antonelli has just done tons of testing, basically, as a reserve driver, I think.
I would count him as a true rookie.
He's a true rookie in terms of not done a race, but he's had so much testing in that car whereas Bortoletto's just in, and Hajar... Hajar is just kind of in. So they're like true rookies because I don't think they've had that much time. Obviously, they've got F2 experience, but with an F1 car, they're going to be in Melbourne basically just like, holy cow, this is the first time I'm having to race one of these cars. Obviously, like we've said, Ollie Behrman smashed it in the Ferrari. He knows how to drive one of these cars. He knows how to keep it on the track, and he did a solid job in that race in the Ferrari, keeping his head cool. So I think going into the first race of this year, he's going to have already a sense of how to feel the car, understand the car.
Yeah, I do think Behrman and Lawson are definitely at an advantage compared to the other rookies. But your rookie season, it's hard because I think some teams are more forgiving than others, and they let them make mistakes and they let them push to their limits and find their limits of their car. But then I do think Red Bull have a reputation of being a bit more cutthroat and savage. So it's whether they give Liam Lawson that leeway to get used to that Red Bull, because I know a lot of people who drove that Red Bull, and I think it was Alex Albon said in a podcast a few years ago, that is like playing a game on full sensitivity mode. Like, it's so hard to drive, and Max has obviously drove that his whole career, so he's super in tune with the car and can push it to its limits. But I think any new driver stepping up into that that second seat has struggled because that car is so hard to drive. So I do think testing is very important for the rookies as well as all the other drivers.
But speaking on Liam, though, we saw, I think it was day 2, Liam was having issues with turn 4, I think it was, where he kept either going wide or having issues. And then there was a point where he actually spun as well. And I think a lot of people were like, oh, that's it, Liam's done kind of thing.
I think a few of them spun out, to be honest. It was quite funny.
He, in that spin, kept the car so well. Like the skill to just actually spin it and not completely lose control. He got it perfectly down. So Liam knows how to drive. He's got his stuff. I think talking about, again, getting the time in the car is obviously very important, and some of them are going to go head first into Melbourne and some of them are going to have a bit more experience. But I think also mentally, also pressure as well. I think obviously Kimi Antonelli has had a lot of time, and he's also got a lot of pressure on his shoulders. He's in a Mercedes. Everyone's saying he's this star boy. Like, he's going to have to live up to the name that everyone's given him, and I think that if he's got the right attitude, it could motivate him. But equally, if he has a wobble in Melbourne, in a sense, or doesn't perform, and there's a big pressure, not even just from his own team, but from social media or something like that, could that shake up the driver? I think the one who's in the best position is Bortoleto, because no one's expecting anything from Kick Sauber. We've said about the top fives each day, I think Stake's pretty much always been in the bottom of the pack.
If testing's told us anything for certain, they're going to finish in 10th place.
Probably. Same as last year. People like Haas, Alpine, Aston.
I do think the midfield's going to be interesting, to be honest.
We talking on that point, I think Williams, we talked about Sainz. I think that car is going to be top of the mid-pack fighting. I don't think it's going to be top of the field fighting. Yeah. Some races it might do, but I think it's definitely improved from last year. And I think Carlos, like you say, has picked up the car very well, very quickly. And I think it's going to be on par with Alpine in a sense. And I think a lot of the field, in a sense, is really just truncated.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the times, there's not a lot between the times.
Between them.
Anyway.
And it's just going to be Stake at the bottom and then everyone else kind of fighting in a sense.
For points here and there, yeah.
But the McLaren, definitely, like you say, is at the top. It looks aggressive. Yeah. The car is really well suited
to Oscar and Lando. We were watching a video, weren't we? And it was showing, one of the McLarens taking the corner compared to Lance Stroll.
Yeah.
And the difference, I mean, obviously we're not experts, we're not mechanics, we're not racing drivers.
Yeah.
But it was so clear, like, how at ease the car was around the racing line and the corner. Like, it just stuck to the ground.
That it was also Lance.
Yeah, but we don't know that, do we? Just from a layman's perspective, like the side-by-side comparison of the McLaren going around the racing line and the Aston Martin, the McLaren just seems so good.
It did. But again, with pre-season testing, you can't judge everything because maybe Lando is going around with a low fuel load and maybe
there's so many variables. There's so many variables. I really find it astounding how the commentators can fill, like,
so many hours.
24 hours, give or take, of airtime with not that much to talk about because we just don't know yet. They
get a chance to be chummy, don't they? They get a chance to have some banter and all that kind of stuff. I did enjoy hearing a more variety of different people because obviously they couldn't have everyone for the full testing.
Yeah, so they don't bring in all the top hits.
One person that's worth bringing up is Alex Brundle.
Yeah.
Martin Brundle's son.
Yeah.
Everyone was wowed by that because he sounds
exactly
like
the
his
same.
Dad.
Yeah. And everyone loves Martin.
He sounds like he knows his stuff, so glad that he's getting involved in the sport. Hopefully he can have the same charisma as Martin Brundle and the same aura as him.
Yeah. I wonder what his background is because obviously Martin was a racer.
But it's just Martin Brundle's son, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know, but he knows his stuff.
I think a lot of what was discussed during testing was in what sense are teams focusing on 2026.
Yes.
So I think Red Bull have been quite open by saying that they are focusing on 2026 because obviously they've got a whole new engine to bring into it and they're getting rid of Honda. So Red Bull have been clear, and also Williams have been clear that they're focusing on 2026 with the new rule changes and regulations. To what sense that's true as well, we don't know.
Yeah.
I think Ferrari, for instance, have been very vocal in saying that they've put a lot into this year's car because of the expectation on Lewis and Charles. So how that progresses, at what point in the season do the teams go, this car's not performed how we need to. We're just sacking it off and focusing on next year. I think the upgrades last year were so important. I mean, look how McLaren progressed and look how Red Bull dropped off. I think even though we were at testing and the first few races, you can say, well, that's the season done for. You can't, because the cars get developed so much over the course of the season. But I think this year that might be slightly different, because they're not going to keep developing it, are they, when they're just going to focus on 2026 at some point in the future, especially if they're not getting the wins that they predicted. So it will be interesting to see what concept, because I think Red Bull have not made many changes to their car at all this year.
Well, it looks like it, and I think a lot of people, when they saw it come out of the paddock, thought it was last year's car almost. But I was watching a bit of coverage the other day saying that there is actually quite, and if you do have a quick breakdown of it, there is a lot that is actually quite changed in the bodywork. Obviously, there can be stuff underneath that has changed. And I think the side pods have changed slightly. On the back wing, there's like some flaps towards the back. They've changed shape. And I think Christian, or one of the engineers, has said almost every element of the car has changed, which is why they're obviously they might not have put as much time into it as they might be doing for focus on 2026.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not what I've heard.
They have said that they've done a change, and almost everything's been looked at. It might not have been changed, but it might have been refined, it might have been reviewed, it might have been updated. But yeah, it might not have been to the level of kind of focus and investment as it might have been, like they're now starting to focus on 2026. So I anticipate, since it was still a good car last year, it will still be good
I
this
don't think
year
we can discount
if
them,
they refined
definitely.
it. But will it be fighting for the top two, top one? Who knows, kind of thing. It's, you know, Max is still a very good driver. Liam's still a very good driver. But it is pretty much McLaren,
to be
Ferrari.
Confirmed. To be confirmed.
Yeah, but McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull as like the hot ones.
Yeah.
Do we even Aston? Like, it's not even.
I think
mid-packs. Then Williams and Alpine.
I think Aston are going to drop down
even
this
further,
year. Yeah, 100%.
Adrian only started 2 days ago.
Yeah, literally
like
Monday.
So he's going to have some magic finger work once he gets in. But for now, I think they're not doing very well.
Yeah, agreed.
But yeah, I think the results in the race. For the results from this weekend, can we predict a race? It's going to be hard because, again, like we say, there's so many different variables. Can we predict how the championship's going to go? I think the odds will. I think if you were a gambling man, the odds on a McLaren bet would not be good. No, they wouldn't.
I think they're the favourites.
They are looking very, very strong.
I think the most entertaining part of testing was what we're going to call the what the fuck moment.
What the fuck?
So this is going to be a regular feature of every race. We're going to have a what the fuck moment. And we both unanimously agreed that when it was kind of mundane, on in the background, listening to the cars go around the track, not really understanding, what data they were getting or whatever.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden there was a red flag because there was a bus.
There was a bus on the
There was a coach on track, just trundling along. And it looked like some kind of paddock club experience where they would just take people around, but it was actually a press bus.
Is it a press bus?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So everyone was just almost too stunned to speak, because in this day and age, why was a coach allowed on track when there was cars going at full speed doing race setups?
Like how even the driver,
who's getting fired? Someone is getting fired.
Even the driver, how does he not think?
Realise,
sound now.
Maybe should I ignore this red light at the start of the track, or So yeah, I think there was not many red flags in testing. And there were no red flags for really reliability issues, or
crashes or anything.
Yeah,
like
which
that.
Is spins, gravel, whatever into the wall, which you would expect when drivers are still getting used to the car, and especially the rookies are trying to push the car to the limits to get a feel for everything. So I think the conclusion that we could take from testing would be that reliability is not going to be an issue this year. Haas had the random issue of the bodywork flying off the engine cover on Ollie Behrman's car, which that's exactly what you kind of want to need to see in testing, because that is what testing's for.
Yeah.
But obviously that was really the only mechanical issue from any of the cars. So which is they're looking really strong, positive, good, great. But there were red flags for things that probably people wouldn't expect. So a random bloody bus on the track, like what the hell?
What the fuck?
Yeah. And then the other red flags were for glass. Was smashed.
I saw and heard that was because Ollie Behrman's car flicked up a stone and it hit a window and it smashed a window.
I didn't know it was Ollie Behrman.
I think
so basically,
it's
all his fault. Basically,
which again you can't really prepare for.
Was it the glass from like where they waved the flag, or like the pit exit? There's like a little hub or something. And basically, a whole window pane fell and smashed. And yeah, it was just covered in. It's a good job they noticed, because let's be honest, I'm not convinced the FIA always notice these things. Because there's been multiple races last year where there were bits of bodywork on the track and punctures getting caused.
Which was the race where they should have, when there was peace on the track for ages.
I can't remember.
And then, was it Bottas who just thought, F it, I'm going to go straight over it, and it blew up into bits?
I can't remember. That did happen, but I can't remember what race it was.
Yeah, FIA, just useless sometimes.
Yeah, and then I think on the first day of testing, there was a red flag because there was a power cut.
And again, that highlighted some weird stuff as like, well, where's the redundancies? Like, where's the backup? Where's the insurances?
If there's a power cut in real life, like on a real live race track?
Night track?
Yeah.
I mean, they have floodlights, but like, is there backup generators if there's a full power cut? Because imagine being on a night track, like going full pelt 100 miles an hour. You don't really have you don't have any lights on the car. And then if there was just a power cut.
If there was a power cut, would they be able to communicate to the drivers or even show the red flags?
I think maybe not that, but I think everyone obviously would already be like, oh, sugar, like we need to slam the brakes. But what if you're in a chicane at high speed, like, and then it just goes pitch black? Like, can you imagine that? It'd be scary.
So dangerous.
They need some kind of, I imagine now it will shine a light on the fact that going into the future, I think on in the race when the power cut happened, it was still kind of going to dusk, so they could still see. But if it did get to a point where it was dark, like, what the hell would have happened at that point?
Yeah,
so
it's interesting. It's interesting because, like, definitely not in my living memory, I don't think there's been a race where there's been power cut.
No.
Because obviously there's not that many night races anyway. So, and then the final red flag was for rain and weather, which I think going into testing was expected because Bahrain was very cold. I think it was about 15 degrees.
Yeah, for a desert. It's pretty cold. Well, deserts get cold at night, but yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't in night they were driving, was it?
No, true.
So I think everyone was freezing. And I think that also plays into the fact that the setups they were running and the race simulations they were running in Bahrain, yes, they'll have that raw data to analyse and the aerodynamic data and the flow vis and all that kind of stuff. But Melbourne's a completely different race to those temperatures that they were experiencing in testing. So, yeah, Melbourne's very, very hot, isn't it? It's like 30 odd degrees, insane humidity. So it also adds to the fact that we don't really know what's going to happen next weekend.
They've got data for maybe like Silverstone, where it's going to be that cold.
Silverstone was freezing last year.
But it's miles away. So
or Canada. Canada tends to be cold and rainy. Yeah.
Maybe Spa if it's raining. But yeah, rain was interesting. I think rain in Bahrain. Only some of the cars had the tyres to do some laps in that kind of condition.
Yeah, not all of
them. Which then caused other cars to miss out on lap time.
I think Aston Martin take like a ridiculous amount of intermediate tyres,
I think it was Williams
like 6 or
something. Aston Martin that had intermediates, so they got extra time going out. But then
I think they would have regretted not having other compounds of tyres because they didn't really need them in the end.
But they've got good data now for at least that kind of thing. So really interesting. But yeah, what the fuck? Hopefully there's no more buses and hopefully no more incidents like that, because we can laugh about
we can laugh about it, but it's actually very serious. And it just, I mean, going back to F175, the amount of the boos that the FIA got were on par with Christine Horner. Like, they are so unpopular, and when they do things like this and get things like that so wrong, where it's so easy to get right, it just pisses everyone off. And from a safety perspective, it is so dangerous, and it's really not on, in my opinion, at all.
No, it's not. So just kind of trying to cover again some of the winners and some of the losers from maybe our opinion, and you can jump in as well. So McLaren, they seem to be top. They've got an aggressive car. Their drivers are pretty happy with how the car's running. They've had multiple years with this team now and with this kind of car. Lando was fastest, was you say on the first day, was it?
I believe so.
So. So yeah, they're looking really, really good. Williams are winning.
Yeah.
Their car seems to be up there, top of the mid-pack.
Yeah.
Their car
Fingers crossed.
has improved. Sainz fastest on the second day, as we already said.
Yeah.
Williams will be battling for some of them top spots if there is like big crashes on like a first corner or something like that.
Yeah. They'll take advantage of rogue situations.
They can get up there. Yeah. They'll get some good points this year. Ferrari, obviously, they've put some focus into this year's car.
Yeah, they put a lot into this.
Part of that focus obviously being because Lewis has joined. They would be cool if Lewis could get an 8th with them. So there's a lot of focus there. That's another point that's interesting to talk about. It's that preseason testing, even though Lewis is a strong driver already, it's interesting for him because he's having to get used to a new engine, new engine noises, how that engine revs, how it shifts, all this kind of stuff. So there's so many things that he's getting used to. Mm-hmm. And I think beginning of preseason testing, he was a bit but then towards the end of it, it seemed like they got it down.
Yeah. Repping my Lewis Ferrari shirt.
Just repping the Lewis merch, same again. So he's confident, even though it's a different car to Mercedes, but he's picking it up well, and we hope that he performs well in his first race of this year. And then also Mercedes. We
cannot discount Mercedes. I think they're looking very...
Fastest day 3. They've got a competitive pace.
Consistently up there with Russell. I think I was not feeling Mercedes last year. I don't think they were that impressive. They've never really got to grips with the concept of that whole car since 2022, in my opinion. But I think slowly, over this winter especially, they seem to have finally connected the dots, and George seems to finally be comfortable after all the porpoising issues and the pace issues. And I'm really, really excited to see how Kimi Tagliatelle does. I think Mercedes are going to be very interesting.
Yeah, they are.
And they showed pace, and it pains me to say it because I'm going to be vouching for Ferrari this year, but I think they are going to be fighting for P2. I really do.
I said in the last one I'd love to see Lewis as 8th again. 8th. But yeah, I'm getting a bit more reserved on the fact that might not happen. But yeah, George is the senior in that team now. Yeah. Which is new for him.
I think he's kind of just really ready to show us what he's got, because I think he's almost like lit the fire within him as well to be like Mr. Mercedes. Yeah. He is.
It's kind of
Mr.
weird and
One.
Unfortunate Toto has given so much limelight to Kimi so early on, and he's not even really done anything or provided results yet. But George doesn't seem too fazed by it. I think he's going to go in. He's going to keep doing what he does, being kind of somewhat consistent and bringing results back in points for the team. So, yeah, they're doing really, really well, and we hope that they can get points this year and keep proving that they are a top 4, top 3 team. Losers, Red Bull.
No, I disagree with that.
I'm saying they're a loser in terms of they're not going to be a Kick Sauber at the bottom of the pack, but they just don't. In this preseason testing, and again, we can't use it as data that's how it's going to be. But with them not putting as much emphasis on this year's car and the development and all that kind of stuff, it just doesn't have as much excitement as it has as the RB20 car.
So why are you giving them a loser title?
Because they're not as competitive. They seem to have taken a step back compared to how they were last year. And we're not like, yes, they're...
I disagree, because I think last year they still won with Max. Max is a phenomenal driver, and they started last season off very, very strongly. Yes, they dropped off midway through, but they still won 2 out of the last 4 races, and Max still won by a country mile. Like, Lando was nowhere near, really.
They did races last year.
Yeah, so I'm saying they've left last year, and even if they've picked up where they left off, it's still very strong. Max is incredible, and then also Liam is going to do a better job than Perez ever did, in my opinion. So they've actually got a 2-driver team as opposed to a 1-driver team this year.
They do, but I'm talking from a pre-season testing perspective. They had some of the lowest laps.
Okay,
so like
let's not get into this year ahead then.
Not predictions.
Just for the testing,
this weekend,
they were the loser.
I didn't
because
think they had the best weekend.
They didn't. They got
a lot of scrutiny. They didn't get as many laps.
Yeah. Okay, I agree then. Yeah.
They were affected by the rain and all this kind of stuff. Sauber. They're just not strong.
No.
They're the bottom of the team.
They're not interested, not exciting. Nothing's happening.
They're not really doing much with Audi coming in. So, yeah. Great for Bortolesso, like we said. It's less pressure for him. Hopefully he doesn't get too wrapped up in all of that and he can just get driving, and then when they've got the Audi car, he can really start to perform.
I feel like everyone else in testing had a narrative and an angle and something to talk about. Like even with Gasly getting P5 on the third day. And Alpine, Williams obviously everyone had like an excitement and a buzz, and it felt like we all had something. We've got something to say about every team. Yeah. Apart from Sauber.
Other than saying that they're doing pretty.
Didn't he have a little tiff with Oscar Piastri there on a corner? I'm sure they touched.
I don't know. Yeah, I know there was two drivers.
I think that was Hulken. I think that was Hulken Oscar. So maybe that was their bit of drama.
Their little what they brought for the tyres.
Yeah, for testing.
And another loser is unfortunately Aston Martin.
Yeah, agreed.
They're probably going to lag behind this year, and lag behind the Williams and the Alpine. You know, when was it last year or beginning of last year or the year before? They just looked amazing. They were like top,
2 years ago now.
They're getting podiums, and then ever since they've just dropped off. Do you think?
Because obviously it was Adrian Newey's first day at Aston this week. Do you think he's going to have an input on the upgrades they bring this season, or is it going to be just completely focus him on next year?
I think he will have an input of this year. He will,
not significantly enough to change the car,
because there's already been so much development done.
Yeah, the car's ready. Yeah,
but he can. There is still things they can tweak. There's still setups they can tweak. So he will maybe slowly start to work his magic, but it might be towards the middle to the end of the season where we start to see it. And another thing, just to very quickly point out, there was talks about flexi wings again. We've got regulations about this. Some people were throwing around that their wings are still a bit flexible and they're having this kind of mini DRS effect. So we'll be interested to see how that plays out when we go into the races, if it does actually happen, because it's not until Barcelona, I think it is, when there's meant to be a complete change on this new wing regulation. Red Bull's been complaining about it for a long time from the other teams. Red Bull complain about everything, but that is another little drama thing that did pop up over the pre-season testing. I think that's still going. So we'll just see how that goes. But yeah, that kind of unless there's anything else that you think of.
No, I think it was great to watch cars on a track again. It was great to see all the drivers. It was great to see all the commentators and all the team principals and be in the paddock again. But largely there was apart from the what the fuck moment.
Yeah, it was eventful but uneventful, because it's like it's
we're
eventful
no further
nice
forward
to watch it, but you can't trust all the results.
It just got me excited because we've got a very exciting week. So we'll leave it there and talk about what we're going to discuss on the next episode. So in this next week, obviously Drive to Survive is coming out. Our naming inspiration for this pod. I think next episode we're going to do a bit of a review of Drive to Survive. Who were the winners and losers from that? What storylines were potentially missed? What storylines were represented, and if we think they were represented and discussed well? And we're also going to put our
prediction.
We need to put our bets in firm. We're going to write them down. Who we think is going to be the drivers' champion, the constructors' champion, the rookie of the year, and the biggest flop of the year. So we're going to do our preseason predictions, and then we're also going to hopefully introduce the Fantasy League and what we've decided to do this year to include everyone who listens and subscribes, and have potentially a prize for first, second and third. So stay tuned for that. We've got plenty more to come. We're so excited for Melbourne. We're so excited for the whole season. We know everyone else that's watching also is too. So we hope that you're enjoying the episodes. We've changed the setup slightly. We're going to keep doing these things. Please give us feedback in the comments what you think about this. And we hope to see you in the next episode. All things Drive to Survive. And then it'll be Melbourne.
Yes. Exciting.
Where Paddock Club, our Sunday Paddock Clubs are commencing, where we all gather round. We're not going to get up at 4 a.m. to watch it. We're going to record it. Watch it on the Sunday, though, with the whole family, food, wine, and then we'll record our reactions.
Yeah.
So lots to come in the next few weeks, and it's all very exciting. And do you know what, as well, for me, the start of the F1, because it was my birthday last week, so I feel like it's a long, bleak winter, no daylight, because we live in England for months and months and months.
Yep.
Then it's my birthday, then it's spring, the sun's shining, the F1 season starts, and it just signals, like, the summer ahead.
It's getting better.
Yeah. And the, like, good times that are coming. So, yeah. We shall leave it there.
Yeah. Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much. Bye.
See you next time.